During the last GME cycle, which was supposed to happen in February, they dragged that out into turn it into a March cycle. Will they be able to do this with the June cycle coming up, Justin?
So, Josh, who knows? But some interesting things to consider. We've got quad witching coming up on June 17th. And for all those who are not familiar, quad witching is the date when you essentially have four different kinds of option or future products expire at the same time. It creates the potential for some things to be spicy. Some other things to note too, Josh. You and I have both been playing options pretty heavily on GME, and the 17th of June was the quarterly options that were open up, and so there's quite a lot of backlog of options that have been building up against the June option date. This is again in addition to all the other stuff that's going on through quad witching in that regard. But what I thought was particularly interesting from this is that the question came up in one of our other videos: is will they be able to kick? That is, will the people who are short be able to kick the can from June to, let's say, a July cycle? Very similar to what happened in February. We still had the Q1 cycle. We just had it later. We couldn't quite figure out what's going on. My guess is from following PiFi, the answer is no. And the reason has to do something with the concept of this quad witching date. As I poorly understand it, Josh, can kicking in terms of, let's say, dealing with XRT comes in this. Let's say that you want a bunch of shares of the underlying that make up, whatever's in XRT. So you short it. Great. You've shorted XRT and you're able to get your synthetic shares. This is probably what happened in November from all the way up until January 6th over when XRT went on Reg Show. The point is that if you're suddenly short XRT, one of the ways you can report not being short is that if you have a contract, as I understand it, to take delivery of these things. This is where these put contracts come into play. Because theoretically, if you can say, hey, listen, we're not actually short XRT, the reason being, yes, we sold it over here, but we've got these puts that we have also got on the books where we are obligated to buy XRT. And because we are obligated to buy XRT, this is proof that we're not actually short, where we're just neutral in this regard. Rolling the put position on XRT to buy them time, as I understand it, creates volatility. But you can only do this so many times, or you can only do this as long as there's not these major market events that occur at the same time, again, which of quad witching would be one of them. So to answer P. Stefan's question from the text, with my very limited, poor, and probably incorrect understanding of the market mechanics of how this works, while it is possible, theoretically, for these shorts to continue to keep can kicking, there are some structural monuments that make it very hard for them to kick beyond, of which an example would be quad witching. Without quad witching on June 17th, it would probably be far easier for them to can kick. Now, because quad witching is going on the 17th, because I believe, I haven't checked today, but I believe XRT is still on Reg Show, all these things I believe compound or reduce the potential pass the shorts have in order to manage their short exposure. Now, I guess the real question is, will that be enough or will that not be enough to trigger MOASS? And my take on that front is, I think that there are many necessary but not sufficient conditions that need to all align at the same time to trigger MOASS.
Something that I see that is really interesting is there's a lot of people who understand these cycles now. And
Yeah.
as these time goes on, it's only going to expand, because if you think a hedge fund is not going to see these extreme irregularities that continuously happen to the stock like every single quarter, then you are very naive. And I can assure you this will happen, and this will start to drive real institutional and extreme hedge fund interest. If this happens every single quarter, let's say there's not a MOASS style this event, but we do see a run up to, I don't know, 250, 300, just let's just call it that. And then it comes back down, and then next quarter, the same thing happens. If this happens again and again, I can guarantee you that there will be extreme players that are just going to play these cycles because it's profitable. And
Yeah.
when you can accurately predict the price of a stock where it's going to go, then people are going to position themselves in a certain way. And I can 100% assure you, it won't just be retail playing these cycles anymore. And then we'll see a situation where these cycles start to get bigger and bigger until there's a situation where, of course, the MOASS style event does happen, because at the end of the day, that is where the stars will align.
Yeah. Maybe one way to think about it is to steal an analogy from Rickards. If everybody knew what the weather was going to be tomorrow, and they knew it was going to rain, and everyone took an umbrella or a raincoat, the weather is still going to rain, because the weather will do what the weather will do. But that's very different than, let's say, if you have some magic crystal ball that'll tell the market. If it's just you that has it, your impact of the various trades or whatever that you're making probably won't impact the market. But if everybody knows what's going to happen, everyone piles into the trade, the fact that everyone's piling into the trade or the fact that everyone's using the same crystal ball will destroy the predictive power of the crystal ball. Now, I don't necessarily know what's that or how that's going to play out in terms of MOASS or in terms of these cycles coming through. But Josh, to your point, the more people that know them, you get a positive feedback loop. I suspect that'll continue to build upon itself. And I do think that's one of those things where you keep coming back to this concept of positive feedback creating a volatility problem, which in turn creates a change in the rate of change problem, which in turn creates so many more problems. And all of a sudden you have all of these very particular, all these very well balanced, well thought out, and very well managed, I like to call them exotic transactions that suddenly start falling apart. In other words, all of the mechanisms, all of the cheat codes, all of the shenanigans, not crime, but just shenanigans that the people who have gone short into whereas a short position, the very tools that were used to help manage a short position become the very things that start working against it if it gets blown up enough.
Yeah, and I think that situation is extremely likely, and I think that could make a MOASS style event much bigger than what we could potentially see and now. Like, because we do need a lot of options being exercised, unless of course there's so many bilateral agreements and swaps between people where the short interest is so ridiculously high, and we just see like I don't know, like a 10-to-1 short ratio on the stock. Then of course it would just take a little movement and then an explosive MOASS style event. But we don't have proof of that, and that's pure speculation. From what we can see though, is we do have these quarterly run-ups. So without trying to speculate on what these bilateral agreements are between parties that we can't see, why not just look at what we can see and play those cycles? From a selfish point of view, it would be better for me if this is not MOASS, because let's say that we do see another run up, maybe they can push it, but you still profit pretty massively from that. Then what happens? Then you have a situation where the next cycle you have double the amount of options that you had before that, and then you make 2 times as much money than you would have if there was a MOASS style event, and then you get ready for the next one and the next one. And then when I tell you can make real FU money from doing this, because this is probably the only stock in history where you can predict the price movement with a relative degree of accuracy with certain dates. And if you had that power for any other stock, would you want to stop and just say, oh, we had one big squeeze? Great. No, you would want to do this forever. I mean, potentially, if this just continues to go on every single quarter for the next few years, that would be the best case situation for someone who is willing to learn about these cycles and train them accurately.
Yeah. And more importantly, Josh, I think this is your point too. You can be in a position to take advantage and capitalize off the cycles, and at the same time, be in a position to capitalize on MOASS. The two are not mutually exclusive. That's the cool part from all of this. And I think that's kind of the big takeaway, because nobody knows, well, maybe God, but beyond that, nobody knows when this is actually going to happen, when it's going to pop off. Until it has happened, it hasn't happened. And so in that regard, figure out what strategy works best for you. If options aren't your thing, no shame there. Buy and hold, that'll cover it. It's not too, it's kind of vanilla, kind of boring, but hey, listen, plain, tried and simple or whatever, right? But for those who are willing to learn a little bit more, there is a
extreme opportunity. Yeah. Calculated risk can be extremely opportunistic for someone who is willing to learn and try new things. So will you be playing this upcoming GME cycle?